Coming up, as the Eastern and Western conferences get their play-in tournaments underway, we take a look inside the Brooklyn Nets building and at one Dayron Sharpe, the contract returning to Brooklyn, and of course, whether or not he can be a starter, a high-level rotation player, what is his value to Brooklyn? We dive into it all coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it's the Locked On Nets podcast right here on Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Marbeck. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We're 100% free on all those great platforms. And let you know, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And Doug, it's about the offseason for Brooklyn. This episode, it's about Dayron Sharpe, but also we're seeing some action around the NBA as play-in tournament games get underway, and we speculate if any of these teams are going to be worth watching when real playoff basketball starts.
Yeah, we'll get to the end. The Warriors for sure are going to be worth watching. Yes. Like they're going to be in. They're going to be in it now.
They're going to be fun.
yeah. So we can talk a little about that at the end of the episode. With some other stuff related to where the NBA sort of sits now with play-ins, and now these series are starting to unfold. But yeah, no, Dayron Sharpe's gonna be an interesting case here this offseason around like sort of what the Nets are going to do. He's entering the restricted free agency. Mm-hmm. He had, I would say, a very good year this year, especially compared sort of like even just statistically compared to the other center in town right now. But because of the position and because of sort of some other guys that exist here and because of maybe some other factors that we'll get into, I don't think the path is like 100% clear for him to return. I think it's probably likely he's back, but there are considerations to think about when Dayron's concerned, because unlike maybe even some other positions, this one, I just don't think it's an absolute certainty that he returns. And I also think he could have a market outside of Brooklyn too. And so I think that there's a few competing factors and a few more that we'll get into about what happens with Dayron Sharpe. But no doubt about it, like he made it an interesting conversation because I think we all could agree he had a very, very improved year this time around.
Yeah, and I do want to get into, obviously, those stats and what it means. Because, it's funny. You mentioned the other center in town, Nicholas Claxton, and we talk about this with all these players. We had the discussion about Cam Johnson yesterday and what last season versus this season felt like based on expectations. And for Dayron, this was like a nice step forward for him, right? Improving a couple of key areas and continue to give the sense that, okay, if you give him more runway, he probably has another level that he can get to in his game. Nicholas Claxton, once upon a time, felt like that too. Now we're concerned that it might be going the other direction. You mentioned as far as Dayron Sharpe, we'll just give the quick quote here on his exit out of the building as the season ended. I'm new to this, referring to restricted free agency, but I like Brooklyn, so God willing, he went Terminator, I'll be back. I assume that the Brooklyn Nets are going to retain him. We can just start there even before we get into the nuts and bolts of his stats and what we think could be the next level for him. My assumption here is that the Brooklyn Nets want to keep him around. He's young. I don't think the contract's going to be anything crazy or that too many teams are going to come in and blow him out of the water. Should be an easy solve for Brooklyn to say, yeah, we'll keep Dayron Sharpe and see what happens next year with him.
You would think so. I will say a couple things that could factor into this outside of just they like him and whatever. Yeah. I do kind of think draft position matters here a little bit for the Nets and like who they end up taking with wherever they pick, because there are a couple centers here who they might value at a certain level, like higher than Dayron Sharpe, and knowing that Claxton isn't like going to be here forever, right? Because he's got a couple years left on the contract. But if they knew that it wasn't going to be like it was a building block piece and not as a future asset, I do think there's a world where, depending on how they value like Heyman or Queen or who, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not sure. So I like, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's the one. Yeah. That's the
it's a good thing to bring up.
I think it's the one piece where if they're like, if they're at seven, and one of these centers is a guy that they value like really high, even above slot, then like Maluach, like I'm probably sure I said his name wrong. I think you know what I mean? Like there's a world where like that does change the trajectory, because the thing about centers is you can't play. It's not drafting wings where you can play three or four, even four of them at a time. Like you can't really play two centers at a time. And if you draft a center and then re-sign Dayron Sharpe and then have Nick Claxton, you just kind of run out of time on some of these guys. And I'm really never a version of like drafting for need. Well, this would be the opposite of drafting for need. I'm always at this point in the life cycle of a team, I'm always like best player available. That's it. Like best player available. Doesn't matter if you have someone on the team who plays the same position. Like you just have to take the best player available when you're in the Nets position. And so it's like, well, if they take a center here, can you make a case that like they should also you know what I mean? I think that's like the one place I think I get a little tripped up about that it's like some kind of lock.
No, and it's a good point to bring up. And I guess, we're talking about the lottery pick there as well. There's another player we can talk about in the second segment. We mentioned his name before, Danny Wolf, that I think is like an interesting prospect with like versatility. And you start to think about how are you shaping this thing? So to your point, I agree that best player available is the policy the Brooklyn Nets should have. And also the reason why, specifically when we talk about probably any position, but also the center position on the Nets roster, the reason why if you see that it's a center, you can go, yep, best player available on our board, we're taking him, is because currently on your roster, there's not a clear-cut guy that you look at and go, oh, but he's really good, right? We'll have a separate episode about Cam Thomas. And no, it wouldn't preclude you from drafting somebody that's a backcourt player that maybe fits the similar type of role, whatever it may be. But it'd be a different conversation, I would think, when you have a larger sample size of success around a certain player on your team, right? Well, all these guys, Trendon Watford and Zaire Williams, right? They all have these different sample sizes. This year was very positive for Dayron Sharpe. I think the question becomes for the Brooklyn Nets is, how positive did we view this year? And what do we project it to be going forward? The big issue for Brooklyn, potentially, in deciding about Dayron Sharpe is maybe there's a market. There's the draft to consider as well. And it's the fact that they already paid Nick Claxton and he had a really bad year. Like, I think that matters in all of this, because if all of a sudden you're locking up whatever the number is going to be for Dayron Sharpe, if you have $30 million, $35 million, even when you have all the cap space in the world, locked into two players that you maybe go, I don't know if either one of them should be a starter. That's still a problem. It's still a problem from a roster construction standpoint and your long-term prospect. So I want to get into the stats for Dayron here, but I do find that interesting. And when you have 5 draft picks coming up in a deep draft class, I think, to go back to your point, best player available policy basically puts you in a spot where you say, and we'll sort out the roster afterwards. We'll figure out the rest of it. Let's just get the most talent we can possibly get here and see who fits where. Coming up here in a second, let's talk Dayron Sharpe's season. Where were the key areas that he improved? And do we think that the Brooklyn Nets would look at him and say, you might be deserving of being our starting center, and Nicholas Claxton may be on his way out? Let's discuss coming up in a moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you our friends over at Skims. Look, you find out Skims is making underwear for men. You got to get intrigued. You hear so much about their quality, maybe from friends, maybe from family. Got to give it a try. It lives up to the hype. If you had issues with underwear, whether it's from a fit perspective, maybe it's comfort, maybe just finding the right style, Skims is going to change all of that. Their men's line offers something for everyone. They got the boxer briefs. They got the classic briefs. It's all designed for the perfect balance of comfort and style, which is exactly what we want. When you think about underwear, when you try in Skims, the boxer brief, you're going to get totally hooked. It's made for an active lifestyle. They move, they never lose shape. They're going to stay in place all day, running errands or just running actually down the street because you're getting some exercise. It's all there for you with Skims. Shop Skims Men's at skims.com/LockedOnNBA and Skims stores. Let them know we sent you after you place your order. Select podcast in the survey and select our show in the drop-down menu that follows. Once again, that's Skims Men's at skims.com/LockedOnNBA. And when you're done with that, head on over to our friends over at Gametime. Look, nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff games. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge, and it's electric in the arena. Not for the Nets this year, but with Gametime, you can be part of the stress. You can get part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. It makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when that demand is sky high. Look, actually, prices actually going down on the app as the tip-off gets closer. Those last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. Like I said, 60% off of buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater. It's all there for you over at our friends over at Gametime. They also got the all-in pricing. There's no surprise fees at checkout, which is saying something, because we've seen in the other places they get those surprise fees going. You want to make sure the price you see is the price you're going to get. That's what that all-in pricing means. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app. Create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
All right, as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about Dayron Sharpe, talking about his restricted free agency and the future of the position for the Brooklyn Nets. Now, I asked the question, or said, well, I posed the idea of, could he be worthy of being a starter? And what do they say? Like in the NFL, if you got 3 quarterbacks, then you don't have any quarterbacks. Well, there's a world where when you're asking questions about, could Dayron Sharpe be the starting center for the Brooklyn Nets? Maybe Nicholas Claxton, maybe Drew Timme. Maybe it means you don't have any centers on your roster, right? That you can really have confidence in. And I think there's a somewhat wide-ranging discussion about this. But let's start with Dayron Sharpe this past season and what he accomplished as far as improving his status on the Brooklyn Nets roster, as opposed to Nick Claxton going the wrong direction.
I mean, he had a really good season, no doubt about it. Like his on-off numbers were really good. He had the second high, well, really, I'll call it that, the end of the season, the highest point differential in terms of net rating on the team, and DFS had the highest, but Dayron was basically first over the course of the season, and really kind of no one else was close. I mean, he had a plus 12.4 net rating. The next highest guy that finished the season with the team was D'Lo at 6.1. So he was like 2 times higher net rating. Now, okay, make some concessions for playing second units and all this stuff, but I actually did slice and dice this a little bit with some of the other starters just to kind of get a look around like what the spread on even the other starters was from a net ratings perspective. And Claxton was easily the worst. I mean, like wasn't really close. And Dayron was easily the best. So even when you back out some of the stuff about like who he's going against, which I know some people, and I, you know, like on-off isn't perfect. I'm very aware of this, but when your team's terrible and most of the other guys are bad and you just mostly win the minutes you're on the court, that is, it's meaningful. Like even if it's not the most perfect stat in the world, it gets us a little closer to like if you were actually just helping or hurting, especially over this number of minutes. So from that perspective, it was good. I mean, there's other reasons to sort of like not get excited, but to be encouraged. The free throw shooting went up this year just in terms of percentage, shot 76% from the line. Field goal percentage did dip a little bit for him, down to 52% after 57. That's kind of on the lower side for a big, so not perfect, though the attempts did go up. Part of that is because he did take a few more 3-pointers this year. Like he had a pretty quick trigger on the 3-pointers, which overall I'm excited to see, even though it hasn't really come around. Like 25, well, he's 24% this year, 26. Like it was always kind of like, oh, can he get over 30? Like, can he get up over 30 with the 3-point shooting? I don't really think that's like in the cards for him, though. I will say the willingness to continue to try it, I think, is a good sign. Like this is exactly what you should do on a bad team. Like you should just take these shots to see if you can get comfortable taking them. Because if you're a center that can hit any threes, that does have some value, especially from like pick and pop stuff. So I think overall, very encouraging statistically. It passed the eye test for sure. And he still remains one of the very best offensive rebounders in basketball. It's like Steven Adams, Mitch Robb, and then him, basically. Like that's like the 3. Those and then Klingon was really good this year too. But the offensive rebounding per minute was among the highest. Like Steven Adams, the absolute GOAT, but like in this perspective, but he's right there with this group that can just get after it on the offensive glass, and that's especially on a bad team is super valuable. So overall, I think it's almost all encouraging stuff. None of the stuff that I said before about them not resigning really has anything to do with him at all. It's just like sort of logistics. It's like more the logistics of what could happen.
And I think too, so I mean, you mentioned just on the offensive rebounding specifically there, per craftednba.com, you can compare Dayron Sharpe and Nicholas Claxton. There's a reason why I bring up the comparison, but for regularized adjusted offensive rebounds and also offensive rebound percentage, Dayron Sharpe's in the 100th percentile of the NBA in terms of his ability to do that. And I think, so I don't want to, we'll have a different discussion about Nicholas Claxton, but I think like the comparison, you mentioned it before about performing well on a bad team, regardless of its first or second unit in a bad season, it matters because it means that in theory, you can translate that and apply it to play on good teams. One of the funny things that we used to do in the early years with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving is say, well, Nicholas Claxton, there's a real value for him because he's versatile on defense. You can switch him on all these things and he can get out and run. But if you're not going to have that type of elite superstar around him, if you're talking about these 2 players as your options, well, you kind of like the bigger body that can set some screens for you offensively, that can be physical around the boards as well. And Nicholas Claxton, from a rebounding perspective, is not. in the higher percentile. He's a lanky guy. He has a better wingspan than Dayron Sharpe, even though Nick Claxton 6'10", 7'2", almost 7'3" wingspan. Dayron Sharpe only has a 7-foot wingspan, despite being 6'9", 6'10" as well. So like, I get lost in the sauce on like what I want for the Brooklyn Nets versus what I think Dayron Sharpe is deserving of. And I'll bring it back to the question that I left the first segment on. If you're walking in the door next year to another season that we've talked about, and you said probably, hey, another big losing season, going to be back in the lottery again, probably in the next draft class. Do you think the sample size from this year is deserving of saying, hey, if Dayron Sharpe in the summer shows like he's earned it, and through training camp that he's earned an opportunity to be the starter for the Brooklyn Nets in the center position going into the year, let's assume no high lottery center gets taken, should that be afforded to him? Because I think what you'll bring up is the contracts, which usually dictates who starts, and Nick Claxton's going to have a big one. But if the Nets bring back Dayron on a multi-year deal, I wonder if it does become a bit open competition based on where Nick Claxton seems to be heading, and at least the needle pointing up for Dayron right now.
I think you already know what I'm going to say here because you kind of said it.
Yes.
I do not think this is like in any way, shape, or form going to be a discussion. The Nets are just not this kind of team. It doesn't matter, right? Like Claxton.
I think what we
okay,
really learned is that they don't have a starting center. Like that's, the Nicholas Claxton shouldn't be a starting center, and Dayron Sharpe might be a good player, but he's not a starting center. And we feel like we both known that, and that's where they're at. Like that's what we know for a fact, regardless of how these guys can perform.
Claxton had a bad year, and had a bad, like, sort of like emotional year with like just weird fouls and just like ejections and like flagrants. And it was never even in question that he wouldn't start. So I just like don't even know what would threaten that at this point. And so, and for sure, Dayron Sharpe at like 10 million a year or something, like for 3 years, like, or whatever, like his contract is not going to be like 20 million a year or something like that. So like 3 for 30 or something like that on Dayron, or a little bit less, is just not going to be a guy that threatens it. If we had seen any hint toward any of that this season, I might say maybe, but there wasn't. Like Claxton, they got absolutely boat raced in all of his minutes this year, completely boat raced. Like every single game, the whole season, he was among the worst net rating guys in the entire league. It was him and all the Wizards guys. Like that was that's the list. So they get completely waxed in every time he plays. He adds on top of it completely knucklehead decisions, like to just like, weird flagrant fouls, like, and they still just like, it was never a thing. So I just don't even know that to me, I just don't think that threatens it at all. So I think the only thing is like, if he gets traded, but I think he just submarines so much of the value that I don't even think that's on the table. So I just think that he's the starting center next year, and nothing is going to change that. I feel pretty confident about that one.
My only pushback there would be like lottery drafted center at the 7th or 7th.
Even
pick.
that guy, I'm with you.
And
even that guy will not start over him because he'll be too young or whatever. Like, and so it's just not going to be the case, I don't think.
Here's the other thing too. I'll bring up about Dayron. We talked about this in season as well. One of the problems is that Dayron Sharpe this season averaged 18 minutes. He played in 50 games, started 2, averaged 18 minutes a game, 2.3 fouls per game. He had like, one of the drawbacks is he's not athletic defensively. He's not versatile. He can't switch out on all these things. Doesn't mean he's a bad player, but he is limited. And when you saw more minutes, you tend to see more fouls. And I think that's actually the biggest thing here from a Brooklyn Nets perspective is we don't believe that he is capable of playing 25 to 30 minutes a night and not probably finding himself in foul trouble more often than not. Now, does that mean you still don't want to use him and find a consistent role for him off the bench? Of course. But I'll go back to the global thing. When you think you have multiple possibilities of who should be playing center or whatever, it means you don't really have the answer at your center position yet. By the way, Nets don't have an answer at most of their positions yet. That's okay. But that to me is the biggest thing that jumps out about Dayron Sharpe right now. I don't know if he could play 30 minutes a night consistently without being in foul trouble in 80% of those games, if not more.
Yeah, I just don't think I feel silly for actually not bringing this up because it's so obvious. Like we
want to say positive. We start positive. We give pats on the back, positive, and then
he was a complete and utter foul machine. No, it's a bad job by. I'll take it. It's a bad job by me by just like not even bringing it up. Because it's like such an obvious thing. He is way too foul prone. And if you hear me going a little slow here, it's because I was actually trying to find like where he ranked in terms of fouls per minute. It's really high. And I'll have it here in a second, but he only because I just didn't flood it for minutes. He's among the biggest, most foul prone guys in the league. And Now, this does trend towards centers too, because like centers are just always going to foul toward the rim much more, right? And especially if you're a little on the slower side, like Zach Edey's got a lot of fouls per minute. Clingan's got a lot of fouls per minute because these guys are kind of slow and just kind of heavy footed and they're by the rim a lot. And that's just where it's going to happen. And even
Dayron Sharpe
that
averages, sorry to cut you per 100 possessions for his career. Dayron Sharpe averages 7 personal fouls.
Yeah, it's really bad. And then if you compare him to Claxton, like that, Claxton's actually really low for a guy who plays who's near the rim. And now he's like a little more of a switch defender. So he's not like playing in closer to the restricted area as much. And there are some other pieces that like don't lend itself to him. Like a lot of his shot blocking has become like track back blocks and like weak side stuff. And he's a good shot blocker, but it's really never like, it's not often on his guy, right? It's on like recovery stuff, which is good. Like you have to be super athletic to be able to do that. It's a compliment to Claxton. But yeah, I waited way too long to mention the fouls piece, which is for sure.
I should have led with it because I had it here as being like, this is the reason why you have to like, slow your horses with it. And maybe it's just like, hey, maybe that's the story until you solve that problem, Dayron Sharpe. And that's a you thing. That's not a scheme thing. It's not a team thing. Until you solve that problem, it's always going to cap your ceiling. And actually, you're right. We're going to run a little bit long before we break for the final segment, because when you do something at such an elite level like he does, rebound, and you can't be on the court to do that consistently, it's because you cannot manage the personal fouls that he's had over the course of his career to be able to accentuate and value what you do so well, seeing the ball, getting the ball, and giving your team an opportunity on the glass at both ends. Coming up here in a second, maybe one more thought. Maybe we'll mention another guy who's been around this roster at the end of the season and what it means for the Brooklyn Nets, but also playoffs. Hey, we got some play-in games and predictions. Let's get into the Jimmy Butler-led Golden State Warriors of it all to close things out in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, I'll tell you about our friends over at Amazon Fire TV. Did you know that Fire TV is also on Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Love to hear that. Grab your pair of controller, subscribe or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed. It's easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple. It's all on your Fire TV. It's got endless entertainment, 4K streaming. Watch more than 1.5 million. What's this number, right? 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and so much more. Look, you got that hardcore gaming experience. Maybe you want to keep it going there with Fire Stick TV. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire Stick TV Fire TV Stick 4K second generation, Fire TV Stick 4K Max first and second generation, and Fire TV Cube third generation. That's Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On.
All right, so as we tie a pretty little bow in today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about Dayron Sharpe, I got bad news. During the break, I think I actually came to a bit of the reality that maybe Dayron Sharpe won't be on this team, because whatever the contract could look like this offseason, when you have the 5 draft picks in the upcoming draft, when you have the lottery pick and the best player available mentality the Nets should have with 4 in the first round, I just can see a world where somebody offers him even a reasonable contract and let's just go, what are we doing? Now, he's a homegrown guy. They drafted him. They're developing him. But I don't know why. I right in that break, I pivoted to, maybe Dayron Sharpe just ends up moving on. And it's probably fine for both sides. And I'm not overly concerned. He's going to show up somewhere else and be this incredible player for another team. And I almost wonder, when we think about the end of the season, before we talk playoffs, about like Drew Timme at 24 years old, getting called up from the G League and like playing some good ball and being able to like shoot a little bit from the outside. Or just go, maybe you just got to move on from this mold of player that can't shoot and, has issues in their game that the Nets have cycled through for the last handful of seasons with Claxton, with Dayron, and others.
It is funny when you think about this. When I don't want to get over aggressive on this this foul thing, but if you are over indexed on it, but like the list of guys that he's with, there are concerns. I mean, these guys are all NBA players. Clearly, I sorted for like 800 minutes or more, but you can kind of see where this is going. Maybe it's like Kelly Olynyk's in here. Okay, fine. Zach Collins, Kevon Looney, Zach Edey's there. I mean, maybe the list is like fine-ish, but no one that fouls with this regularity is awesome. And so I think like maybe you can just kind of put him in a box now of like where he's going to kind of be. Like, yes, he's going to be a really good rebounder. The foul thing could get in control. I mean, like slightly more athleticism / a little bit more time on court where you're just not making, these kinds of mistakes essentially, or, but I don't know.
You foul
Again,
less because you're going to play more. So you just let some things go than maybe making a lazy play, right? I mean, that solves a little bit of it.
Yeah, like again, like I maybe go over index on it now, but like it doesn't paint the rosiest picture. So there are good things to grab onto here. There are other pieces. I think it comes down to, I'll go back to what I said at the beginning, then we can kind of just look at a few of these these playoff things. But I really think it comes down to who they draft with the first pick. I don't think the other guys matter. Like I don't think like the back end of the first round guys, like those can just be anybody. I don't think any of those guys are going to come in and like threaten it, right? Like if they drafted some center at like 26 or whatever.
Like Danny Wolf. If you go with Danny
Wolf, I don't think that would matter. I don't
Yeah.
think that would really matter because those are still kind of dark throws, right? And you do know, I will say, Dayron, he can play in the NBA. So like you're not positive sometimes with these late round first picks, late round draft picks. You do know Dayron can play in the NBA. I think that's clear. It's just like what kind of commitment you want to make to it. I think that's really the only question. So I think it'll come down to if they end up drafting one of these guys, like they think Queen's awesome, let's say, right? And they end up drafting like 7th.
Yeah.
Then like, I don't know, then maybe it's like just not a priority. But I think it kind of comes down to that. You want to highlight any of these, go look into any of these series? Want to just pick a series real quick here before we get out of here? We'll kind of take a look at each one of these before the way out, just make a prediction. We don't have to go like high level on, or it's like super deep dive in any of these, but
yeah, well, my big prediction about how ugly the season would look if Orlando lost. Well, they absolutely destroyed the Atlanta Hawks, and now the Hawks will have another chance to get themselves into the playoffs. But Orlando performed well. Obviously, Golden State, Jimmy Butler absolutely crushed. Yeah, what series do you want to go with? I'll pick anyone you want to take.
I think the Pistons have a real chance to beat the Knicks. I don't think they're going to necessarily, but I don't know if I'm really not. I know there's Nets fans out there that freaking hate the Knicks. I'm really not like this. It'd be like slightly annoying, I guess, just because I feel I would have to read a few more tweets about it, like toward me. But like, other than that, I definitely don't hold like the same crosstown vitriol that some Nets fans for sure have for the Knicks. I just honestly don't care. But I think that I just kind of like the Pistons, and I might be at a crossroads of, I heard crap all year about how the Pistons were like this lightning rod for why you don't tank.
Yeah.
And now they're like at the 6th seed, and then you have the Knicks combined with it. And there's this part of me that just wants it to happen. There's this part of me that just wants the Pistons to really give it to, and I guess you get the McHale thing in there too. Yeah. And if Cade were to cook McHale, that would be an interesting thing. I don't know. There's a few things. So I think I would like, and I think they have a chance to do it too.
Yeah, I mean, physicality of the Pistons, right? Like something that can give the Knicks problems. Knicks have kind of like ended this season in a little bit of seems like internal turmoil, and they've been questioning themselves, and people have been questioning Tibbs and why he hasn't solved the problems instead of at the end of the year saying, yeah, we should have fixed this a long time ago. But here's what I'll keep it very simple. And I like, first of all, we love Koo. Locked On Pistons. Check him out. Support the guy. Jeez, he's been doing the Lord's work over there. There's a world where Cade Cunningham is the clear best player in the series, right? No matter what the results are, we'll look back and go, he's already come on. We already know where he's headed, right? So if he's the best player in the series, that's the way the NBA works. If you have the best player in a 7-game series, it gives you a real chance to win, even if collectively the other team has the better roster. Now, depth and all that stuff may matter. Guess what? Not the deepest team, the New York Knicks. They have the better 5-man starting lineup. But if Cade Cunningham's going to go off, and you mentioned the Mikal Bridges matchup, like Bridges, not to pick on him, has not been the defensive player. He wasn't the defensive player that we thought he was going to be when he came to Brooklyn from Phoenix, right? It never seemed to show up. So I'm rooting for Cade Cunningham to lead the Detroit Pistons. In this case, past the Knicks. It could have been any matchup, but I like that. I like that one, and probably going to be, in my mind, one of the more entertaining first-round series that we're going to see, right? A lot of these are sleepwalks. I think this has a real good chance to be a really fun, physical series between those teams.
Yeah, there's a couple like kind of interesting FanDuel lines on this series if you like the Pistons. I mean, the Pistons are like definitely underdogs here. The Knicks are favored. The Knicks for the series are minus 430. I mean, these are pretty, and like usually these series play out the way you think they're gonna. Like the NBA is not full of upsets. And we had the Heat a couple of years ago, and like in Dallas, I guess, makes the finals. Like, but these aren't like the Heat are like the real kind of like total outlier. Like most of the times this goes as expected. It's just kind of how it is. But like there's like some alt lines. I don't even love these things, but like the alt lines, like for the series spread, like Pistons plus 1.5 because they take it to 7 or something like that. You're like, I don't know. Like, we get back to 7 plus 136. Maybe sink my teeth into that. And I think, but I know I'm sometimes a prisoner for the narrative I would like to happen. And
by the way, though, we can be not to run a little long here, but like you could be sitting there in game 6 of this series in New York, and and the Pistons are down 7 with 3.5 minutes to go, right? You come back, you make a run, you end up forcing the issue. Okay, game 7, right? Oh, this will be in Detroit, coming back to New York.
Yeah, I was
gonna say, you on your home court with your fans, Detroit starving, a great sports town, you come back, you get it, and you push a game 7. If you lose that game, well, you took the Knicks to 6 games, and the Knicks are moving on, right? Like, we know how these narratives end up looking when you reflect back on a 4-2 series versus took them to game 7, where anything can happen. And for all of the narratives and everything that's gone on with New York, do I want to see Cat with some real pressure for himself in New York and the bright lights? Like, that's followed him around since he was drafted by Minnesota, and that could continue. So that's what I like about it too. It's like the longer that series goes, Detroit feels no pressure. Knicks feel a ton of pressure every game further that it goes beyond being a 4-game sweep, a 5-game gentleman sweep, whatever the case may be. So yeah, and by the way, you're 100% right, because I love narratives and I get sucked into them and I start convincing myself that like, well, it's a good narrative and therefore this should be a 7-game series and Detroit has a real chance. We'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, and then there's like some concern. The Knicks were just really bad against really good teams this year. Like, I don't know. There are some other things that kind of line up, and they had a really good season overall. All right, we are going to get out of here. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Nets wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube as well. Leave a comment. We get those Fan Take Fridays going. Make sure you leave a comment over on YouTube.
Okay, I'm going to go for this one here. Spiramus meliora resurgit cinnaberis, which is Latin for "we hope for better things, it shall rise from the ashes," which reflects the enduring spirit of the Detroit City. That's one of their mottos. How about that?
And so one of the all-time great poets, this is not what you were supposed to read. So just as a reminder, you were supposed to read
but in other news, got a little bit sidetracked. Love a good narrative. Now, everyone should know, just to run a little long, we had a different narrative that we wanted to talk about, which was this. There wasn't a lot to look forward to on the court, and I'd say in retrospect, the most fun period was when they had Schroeder going. But bottom line is, it was entertaining to hear you guys give your takes and commentary on it. I just wanted to commend y'all for sticking with the content amidst a pretty flat season. And you can go ahead and say who it's from, Doug.
Oh, that's our boy Saraf over there. Got that email today. Love to see it. Also, one of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Pretty much a perfect end, I think. Nailed it. Basketball. Yeah.